It started as a simple interview, a bright night filled with laughter and celebration for Lionel Richie's new memoir, Laughter and Music. Everyone expected jokes, stories from his long career, maybe even a song or two. But you won't believe how quickly the mood in that room changed. One moment Lionel was the smiling legend the world adored, and the next he became a father, remembering the moment his life turned upside down. When he began talking about his daughter Nicole, his confident voice suddenly cracked. His eyes filled with tears, and the crowd that had been clapping moments ago fell completely silent. It was as if time froze. This wasn't the Grammy-winning superstar anymore. This was just a man, broken, emotional, and honest. Speaking from the deepest part of his heart, he talked about the moment that changed everything. "I fell in love with that little girl instantly," he said softly. "I told her, you'll never have to worry again. You've got a dad now." His words hit everyone in that hall like thunder. People came to hear about his book, but they ended up hearing the most personal confession of his life. Let me tell you, this was not the Lionel Richie people saw on stage or on TV. This was a man stripped of fame, standing there with tears in his eyes, showing that sometimes the most powerful stories are not sung. They are lived. But here's the shocking part. Before this beautiful father-daughter bond began, Lionel himself was going through the darkest time of his life. The fame, the lights, and the endless applause could no longer fill the emptiness inside him. He had everything the world could offer, yet he felt completely lost. Lionel grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama, a small-town boy with a big dream. He always said music saved him when nothing else made sense. And in the 1970s, it did. He became a star with the Commodores, and soon his name was known all around the world. Songs like Hello, All Night Long, and Endless Love turned him into a legend. But what the world didn't see was the pain that fame brought with it. Behind the perfect smile, Lionel was slowly breaking. The early 1990s hit him hard. His marriage fell apart, his father passed away, and the loneliness that followed was unbearable. He once said that he didn't even recognize himself anymore. The man who wrote songs about love was now struggling to feel any love at all. He described that time as the darkest chapter of his life, a chapter that nearly ended his spirit. And this is where it gets interesting, because just when Lionel thought he had nothing left, destiny took an unexpected turn. A little girl named Nicole came into his life. She was only a child full of energy and curiosity. But her parents, friends of Lionel, were struggling and asked if he could help take care of her. Lionel agreed, thinking it would be temporary, just until things got better. But you won't believe how this simple act of kindness became the turning point of his life. Nicole was small, innocent, and full of life. But there was something about her that pulled Lionel in. She needed more than love. She needed someone who wouldn't walk away, someone who would stay no matter what. And somehow in the middle of his own brokenness, Lionel found that strength. He looked at her and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He later said it wasn't a choice. It was something that just happened naturally. He said, "I didn't think I had it in me to be a father, but when I looked at her, I just knew I was her dad." It was love that didn't need blood to make sense. It was love that healed. Lionel began to see himself in her laughter, in her innocence, and in her need for comfort. That little girl became his reason to wake up every morning. She filled the emptiness that fame and fortune couldn't. The bond between them grew stronger every day until one day, Lionel realized he could never let her go. Nicole wasn't just a child he was caring for. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. And that was the start of a love story that not even Lionel's most beautiful songs could describe. But what makes this story different? It wasn't built on perfection. It was built on pain, forgiveness, and the courage to try again. Lionel didn't save Nicole's life. She saved his. She gave him something the world couldn't: peace. Years later, when people asked him how he managed to stay strong after so much loss, he always pointed back to that moment, the night he promised a little girl that she would never have to feel alone again. And as he spoke about it in that interview, the same emotions came rushing back. It was clear this wasn't just a memory. It was a miracle that changed both their lives forever. As Lionel's story continued, the audience leaned closer, completely drawn in by the raw emotion in his voice. The room, once filled with laughter, was now silent, hanging on to every word. He took a slow breath and said, "You know, I thought I was helping her. But the truth is, she was the one who helped me." The craziest part was that Lionel didn't even realize how much that little girl had changed him until years later. He had gone from being a man broken by fame to a father healed by love. But here's the shocking part. As much as he wanted to protect Nicole from the pain he had once felt, life had its own plans. As Nicole grew older, the world around her began to shift. Suddenly, she wasn't just Lionel Richie's little girl anymore. She was Nicole Richie, the face on magazine covers, the star of the hit reality show The Simple Life alongside Paris Hilton. Fame came for her just like it had come for her father, but this time it hit differently. Cameras followed her everywhere, and the headlines weren't always kind. Lionel later said that watching his daughter stumble in the same spotlight that once blinded him was one of the hardest things he had ever done. This is where it gets interesting because instead of controlling her or forcing her to live by his rules, Lionel decided to do something most people wouldn't expect. He chose patience. He chose love over judgment. He said, "I told her, fall as much as you need to. I'll be right here when you get back up." Those words became a promise he never broke. When Nicole faced her darkest moments, from public scandals to personal struggles, Lionel stayed by her side. He didn't care about the tabloids, the rumors, or the criticism. He cared about his daughter. The same man who had once been lost now became the anchor, holding his daughter steady. And let me tell you, not many people could have handled what Lionel did during those years. Fame can destroy relationships, but in their case, it tested the limits of love and made them stronger. People often asked Lionel how he managed to stay calm while the whole world was watching his daughter fall apart. He smiled and said, "Because I've been there. I know what it's like when the world turns its back on you." He had lived that pain. He had seen how easy it was for people to cheer for your success, but disappear during your struggle. And that's what made him different. Instead of giving up on Nicole, he showed her what unconditional love truly looked like. It wasn't about saying the right things. It was about staying when everything went wrong. But here's the part no one expected. As Nicole began to rebuild her life, something inside Lionel shifted again. He saw in her the same fire, the same resilience that had once kept him alive during his darkest times. "She taught me strength," he admitted. "Every time she got back up, I saw a reflection of myself." It was almost as if destiny was reminding him that life has a strange way of giving back what you give to it. The more he loved her, the more she healed. And the more she healed, the more he found peace. Over time, their bond became unbreakable. Nicole once said in an interview, "He believed in me before I believed in myself." That one sentence summed up everything. The man who wrote songs about love was now living its truest form. Not the kind that ends with applause, but the kind that keeps going even when no one is watching. It was a story of redemption for both of them. Lionel, the superstar who had lost himself in fame, and Nicole, the daughter who lost herself in the chaos of celebrity, had both found their way back through love. And this is how life showed them that love doesn't fix everything at once. It simply gives you the courage to keep going. When Lionel spoke about those years, his voice softened. "There were nights I didn't know what to do," he said. "But every time I looked at her, I remembered the promise I made, that she would never feel alone." That promise had become his guiding light, a vow that turned pain into purpose. As he spoke, the audience sat frozen, their eyes glistening, realizing they weren't just listening to a celebrity's story. They were witnessing a father's confession. A confession that love, even when tested by fame and failure, can still heal the deepest wounds. As Lionel continued to speak, his tone shifted from sorrow to pride. He smiled softly, remembering how far they both had come. Time had a way of turning pain into wisdom, and Lionel knew that better than anyone. "You know," he said, "I used to think my biggest songs were my legacy, but now I realize my legacy calls me Dad." The crowd laughed gently, but behind that laughter, there was a deep truth. Lionel's story wasn't about fame anymore. It was about redemption, forgiveness, and the beautiful circle of love that came back to him when he least expected it. But here's the shocking part. Lionel never imagined that the same little girl who once saved him would grow into the woman who would remind him what true happiness looked like. Nicole had changed her life completely. She had gone from chaos to calm, from tabloids to peace. She became a wife, a mother, and a woman who stood proud in her own story. And Lionel, he couldn't stop smiling whenever he talked about her. "I'm in love with the tribe," he said jokingly, referring to Nicole, her husband Joel Madden, and their 2 kids. Watching their kids torture them is the best revenge. The audience burst into laughter, but Lionel wasn't just joking. There was